All right, you are listening to KQCK radio station. This is Joe, and we are broadcasting out of Santan Valley, Queen Creek, Phoenix, and the world. It is Thursday, another great day for the Marijuana Report, the nation's leading radio show on medical marijuana. Let me introduce the host of the show here, Vincent Pelizzato. How are you?
I am doing great, Joe. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty good today. We've got tremendous giant dust storms that came through yesterday, and I'm just trying to, hack all that dust out of my lungs. Other than that, yeah, I'm doing great.
Well, that is good to hear, man. We've got beautiful weather up here in Denver, and just a hell of a lot going on. I'd like to welcome a very special guest to the show, Ean Seeb. He is the owner of Denver Relief, one of the premier dispensaries in the Denver metro area, as well as a strong patient advocate and supporter of the industry. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Vincent. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, man, we are just up to our neck in excitement in this industry here in Colorado today, aren't we?
This week has been one of the most... I've been involved in the medical marijuana industry going on 3 years now, and this week is probably the most exciting week we've had policy-wise, since the inception of the medical marijuana industry here in Colorado.
Wow.
It's been real active, and Joe, I mean, I know Arizona is super active. Everybody's just getting ready to, get their licenses and things like that this month, at least be able to apply for them
right
in Arizona. But I tell you what, there's some landmark stuff going on here in Colorado, in addition to things outside the industry like the civil unions bill, that is basically just stalled, and we ran out of time. But now, in the midst of all this, in addition to the civil unions bill, we've had several MMJ-related bills that have also stalled, and we are waiting to hear, as we do the show here, on whether or not there's going to be a special session hosted by Governor Hickenlooper to basically reintroduce and, debate whether or not civil unions, as well as the DUID bill specifically for that would affect the patients for under a 5 nanogram limit, threshold limit, in impaired driving. So, people are just like on the edge of their seats right now. We've got organizations going back and forth, and there's just a lot of controversy, not only on that bill, but tell us a little bit about the other stuff that's going on, Ian.
Well, locally, right now, we're dealing with city council. And one of the city council women, Debbie Ortega, has sponsored some legislation, to prevent advertising within 1,000 feet of schools, daycare centers, parks, and rec centers.
To prevent advertising?
It's a bill to ban outdoor advertising.
Okay.
And it's not a complete ban. What it would do, essentially, is prevent medical marijuana center owners and medical marijuana center shops from listing prices of things, basically putting the business before the patient. And while that's going on, there is an industry group that related to a marijuana industry group that is looking to make that bill take it even further. And instead of making it just 1,000 feet of schools, rec centers, and parks and daycare centers, to do an entire citywide ban. And it's interesting because for the first time you see marijuana groups and the marijuana industry looking towards self-regulation, but actually in an attempt at the same time stopping us from advertising from a traditional advertising sense, which is billboards, which is signs. In some cases it's sign twirlers, and it's really nothing like this has ever taken place before.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would impose the same restrictions on alcohol. And, again, it's just another hurdle that the industry faces, and business owners are thinking about getting into this, thinking, I'm going to be able to advertise my business in a normal fashion, and absolutely not. And I guess the concern here from a national standpoint is if, Colorado gets this passed, how many other states are going to be looking, again, to restrict the industry, business owners? And essentially, I think this add, again, another hurdle, another level of difficulty, and be able to thrive as a business owner.
I agree and I disagree, because there are ways in which one can advertise that doesn't need to necessarily promote the product. We can put a sign up that says Denver Relief, an address showing, denverrelief.com. It's got a green cross on it, but it doesn't mean that I need to have pictures of sexy ladies holding flowers covering their breasts to promote my business.
So is it a sexy lady thing, though, or is it is it specific to, because, there are certain things to where, again, if I'm alcohol, for me to put up a moisture beer with, let's say some, looking like it's perspiring on a hot summer day, and then seeing the words refreshing underneath it, that would fly all day. And I'm not saying from a patient perspective or from legitimacy in the industry that we should have, again, sexy ladies, but you put up Denver Relief, and without the actual cannabis leaf, I might miss out I might miss the message, I guess is where I'm going with that.
I understand, and I don't necessarily think that, I take it back, it doesn't necessarily need to be sexy ladies, but advertising prices, as you're well aware from living here and being in the industry, we have undergone enormous marketing shifts as far as supply and demand, and really the price. The price has come down here, and it's probably lower in Colorado than it is anywhere in the country right now to purchase marijuana. And that's because of what's going on with medical marijuana centers, and they have created really an entire economy or an entire industry based around this. And there are different places that promote different ways, and I think that there's responsible advertising, and I think that there's irresponsible advertising. And it's one thing to have your sign up, to have a name, to have a phone number, to have a direction. But again, I don't think that we necessarily need to promote pictures of pot leaves all over. I'm a responsible business owner. I have no problem promoting my business without needing to put pictures of marijuana plants up on a billboard on Broadway.
Can you use the word cannabis in the proposed legislation?
I am not sure.
Yeah, and I know, it's interesting to see, the medical marijuana industry group actually pull for a citywide ban, and of course, the Cannabis Business Association and Act for Colorado are in favor of the proposal as written by Representative Judy Montero.
Which is a 1,000-foot ban and not an entire citywide ban.
Yeah, and I think, one could make a case that, that is more sensible in its proposal. I don't think that there's a reason to advertise and on top of a school or a daycare necessarily, but anybody with any half a brain is going to know that these kids travel and go within our neighborhoods and by bus or whatever, and they're going to see the signs one way or the other. So it's almost, I don't know. I go back and forth with it. I definitely don't think that we need, again, price wars advertised, and I don't think that we need scantily dressed women representing industry. In fact, I think it absolutely does nothing for our industry as a whole. I have no one.
I feel that sense of that.
So
this is just taking us back to the Marlboro Man type of advertising from the, from the 60s?
Yeah, and it's unnecessary. Again, I think especially with technology, and if you can use the word cannabis, or again, I don't see pharmaceutical companies advertising all over the place. Not that they're not allowed to, but you just don't see them advertising in that sense. And I think to your point,
you don't see. Wait, hold on a minute. You don't see pharmaceuticals
advertising goes word of mouth because of the professionalism of the shop. And people want to shop in places that are offering a good knowledge base and good community and a safe place to shop and good medicine.
Let me stop you for just a second, Vincent, and ask you this. You don't see pharmaceuticals companies advertising. Every second commercial is some kind of pill with 50 different, you're either going to have a stroke, you're going to die, you're going to get the shingles,
I take that back. I see them advertising on TV in that type of medium format, but not in the format that the bill is representing, because the bill doesn't talk to any type of media advertising, does it?
No, it does not. It's restricted to outdoor advertising.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, all right. I misunderstood. Thank you.
Sign twirlers, and in fact, you don't see people advertising pharmaceuticals on billboards in Denver. At least I can't think of any offhand. And you certainly don't see signs, and you certainly don't see sign spinners. Get your Viagra here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't open up a doctor's office and hire a sign spinner, wearing a bikini out on a 90-degree day going, grab your Viagra and take me home.
That's because you'd need a guy with an erection standing out there on the side of the corner.
Hey, banana hammocks for all. Right.
We're trying to keep it professional. We're trying to keep the banana hammocks out of it. We're trying to keep... And at least when I speak for Denver Relief doesn't have sign twirlers out there. We have a sign. We have a sandwich board that we keep on the street that just has an arrow pointing to us. It has our phone number. It says Denver Relief. There's never been a picture of any marijuana. We have a billboard that may be going up that's simply just our location that just says Denver Relief with an arrow pointing to our shop and the URL. And for the people who know, for medical marijuana patients have become familiar with just as a Red Cross is for hospitals, or a Green Cross in Europe signifies a pharmacy. The Green Cross in Colorado has begun to represent medical marijuana. So you can put a Green Cross up. Doesn't say anything about marijuana. It's not located within 1,000 feet of a school, a rec center, a park, or a daycare center, and it's fine.
Yeah,
there are ways in which one can be responsible with advertising. There are ways in which one can be irresponsible with advertising. We've all seen the magazines that are here in Colorado. You can look at a High Times as well if you're not in Colorado, and you can see that some of the ads are responsible. Some of them are they're very simple, they're professional, and some of them are a little bit racy. And my personal opinion is that there is no place for that. We've been given an opportunity here in Colorado by the legislature, by the people who voted for the right to use medical marijuana with Amendment 20 back in 2000, and now with the creation of the Department of Revenue's Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division, that are now allowing us to operate these medical marijuana centers. And I think that we need to be respectful to some degree, and there's no reason to throw it in people's faces. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should.
I agree. So let's switch gears here for a second. And, there was another important topic, and, right prior to the show, I know you saw the emails coming across your desk from, different industry organizations here in Colorado. And, one of the things that, I think is standard across the board is that each state has patient fees that they pay to essentially register as patients. Here in Colorado, of course, it's with the Department of Revenue that patients register with. It's with the Department of Health here in Colorado. And it's a $35
Public Health and Environment.
Correct. So they pay a $35 flat fee, which is down from the $90 last year. And that $35, or the $90 previously had created a surplus here in Colorado. And it's, one of, I think, coming from a sense of, how much does it really cost to process an application? In some states you see, $15, I think is what it is, or $20 up in Alaska. Other states I think in Arizona is it $150, Joe, in Arizona?
That's $150 each, yeah.
Yeah, $150, and there is no provision there's a half price provision if you're indigent. So if you're poor in Arizona, they knock it down to $75. But at the end of the day, people have to ask and compare apples to apples and say, okay, you're processing a registration on basically the same type of patient in Alaska and as in Arizona as in Colorado. Why does it cost $150 in one place and 10% of that in another place? And what are they doing with the money? And this has been a major issue here in Colorado. Right now we've got a surplus of approximately just a little under $8 million. And one of the suggestions that's being proposed is to shift that money over to the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division, which is actually an arm of the Department of Revenue here in Colorado. So it's actually something that is it doesn't exist in Arizona, whereas in Arizona it's just the Department of Health that's over the industry. There is no enforcement division. Anything that is being enforced, of course, through local or state, county law enforcement. But here in Colorado, it's suggested that the $8 million surplus that patients have paid into be moved over to be able to essentially bridge a gap in their funding budget to be able to and essentially pay their workers to enforce our industry. What are your thoughts on that, Ian? I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. The Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division took in approximately $10 million, I think, within 24 hours back in 2010 when we first applied. And that money was to be used to regulate us, to license us, to allow us to operate, to enforce us, to enforce the rules that they were then working on, which is now known as the Colorado Medical Marijuana Code, a 77-page comprehensive piece of legislation that says exactly what we can and cannot do. And unfortunately, the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division ran out of money earlier this year. And as a result of that, they had to not lay off, but they transferred 17 employees out of the Enforcement Division into other departments within the Department of Revenue. This is the same. The Department of Revenue regulates alcohol here. They regulate gaming. They regulate racing, dog racing, and now they're regulating medical marijuana. And although as a medical marijuana center owner, I want to see enforcement, we have yet to see many of the bad players have their investigations be shut down, be fined for violating various laws that are being violated, in my opinion, all over the place. But it gets into a sticky situation when you're taking money that is, one, it's a part of the state constitution that says that the money in this registry shall only be used to fund the patient program, the licensing program. We've had the governors come in on two separate occasions and take $4 million at one point. Last year, I think $6 million was taken to pay off one. The Colorado, the medical marijuana fund, or the patient fund last year paid off 1/6 of the Colorado deficit. $6 million of the $54 million deficit that Colorado was going through was paid off.
Sure. I mean, we're balancing the budget with medical marijuana in this state right now. That's what we're doing.
And we should do that by taxes. There's ways in which it can be done, but not by stealing money from the patients. And so, as a medical marijuana center owner, I can appreciate the fact that the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division wants money, and where better to take it from than the patient fees, the same people who are visiting medical marijuana centers in many cases, not in all cases, because some people are growing for themselves and some people have private caregivers. But for the vast majority of the 100,000 current licensed patients, the majority of them are going to medical marijuana centers. So the theory is, who better to go from than the people who are paying into this to be able to shop at these medical marijuana centers and use this money for enforcement. So as a medical marijuana center owner, I can see the point in I want to have enforcement. I want to see the enforcement division come in here. I want to see them regulate what it is that we work so hard. We've spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars coming up to speed and installing the correct surveillance and security cameras and the safes and the scales and making sure that everything is out of patients' touch so that they can't touch medicine when they come in, and locking things up and having double security doors. So from that side, I can see it, and I want some regulation. But on the patient side, I am a patient who pays into the fund, and I see both sides. As a patient, I don't want my money that's supposed to be funding the licensing authority to take my money that I've paid. I've paid a couple $100 over the past 3 years. I've been a patient for several years. I've paid about $500 into the registry so far, and from what I understand, only about $50 needed to be used.
Yeah, and I think that's the sickening part, and the part that, has got really patients up in arms. Now, the problem that I see is you've got, several organizations saying that they, maybe 50 or 60 people strong, maybe 100 in some case, that's stating that they're representing patients. This is a very small cross-section of the patient population here in Colorado. We sit around 100,000 people on the registry. To have 100 people in your organization and say you represent patients is, it's fluff. Let's just call it what it is. And I think that really what people want, who are patients, is, they wouldn't mind if it went there, but they would at least want to know, listen, this is what you're going to pay, and 20% of this or 30% of this is going to go for enforcement and regulatory issues, and the other 70% is going to go to process your fee. And I think that really what it comes down to is an issue of honesty, an issue of being honest with patients so that they know what their money's going to, and letting them be able to make the choice whether or not they want to be a patient through the system. It's really, when you sign that registry and you're going in and saying, I'm going to be a patient, you're really signing off and saying that this system works and that I stand by it. There's a lot of people that we know of, I'm sure you've had people that have just come out and said, you know what, too much regulation. I'll just go back and take the ticket. I don't want to shop at a dispensary. I'll just go to my caregiver. And of course, you've got that debate kind of heating up right now.
Sure.
On how much regulation is needed for people to go get medical marijuana. I mean, it's, overlay over overlay of regulation on something that, I wish they would apply it to the pharmaceutical industry, quite honestly.
I don't disagree with you. I have seen the progression of this 5 years ago. I never would have thought that I would have wanted regulation here. But now that I'm starting to see how it helps people, and I'm starting to see how, unfortunately, some medical marijuana centers and some providers are in it for the money and aren't taking the time to properly flush their buds. We're seeing instances where there's powdery mildew and mold and all kinds of nasty, harmful substances in marijuana that are going to sick and dying people. The medical marijuana patients, the very same people that they're supposed to be helping, they're actually getting more sick. And so from that degree, I welcome that. And there needs to be some things put in place here so that those types of things don't happen, and that whether or not somebody chooses to go to a private caregiver or a medical marijuana center, or, if they're growing it on their own, they're going to know what's in it. But when you're going to a private caregiver and you're not a part of that system, there still needs to be some accountability there.
There absolutely does. And I mean, me personally, in protecting patients' rights, in protecting their, knowing that they're going to get good medicine, I think the regulation is a good thing. I think that it just doesn't need to be over applied. And I think, going back to the DUID bill that was proposed here, you're talking something that, allows no tolerance for patients. This is something that is way overstepping in its power, and I was just amazed to see that it got one vote, both in the House and the Senate. Is what this thing passed by, and even people who voted yes for it were still not really in favor of it, which makes me think, why are we pushing these things through? And this is what's happening in this country as a whole: is that we're pushing things through just to move the paperwork forward. The people aren't really looking at the impact of it. And quite honestly, you and I both know that the DUID bill has, in its current form, has major flaws that would impact patients who are medical marijuana patients, let alone people who may, even use a pain pill from a friend. I mean, you're talking, any drugs that actually goes and oversteps way beyond marijuana here in Colorado. Tell us a little bit about that and what you think.
Sure. Well, the DUID bill was a bill. It failed, and it failed because of politics. The legislative session came to a close yesterday, 120 days long. Yesterday was the last day. And what happened was, in an attempt to block civil unions from ever hitting a vote, the DUID bill didn't make it to a vote, and so it was killed and it died off. And so we're not dealing with it now, although we know that Governor Hickenlooper is calling a special session to deal with civil unions. It has yet to be announced whether or not he's also going to include the DUID bill. He has to say exactly what he's planning on including in the special legislation. We haven't yet heard. We just know that civil unions are going to be a part of it. But essentially, the DUID bill was this. There was a per se limit of 5 nanograms per milliliter, that if somebody was found to have more than 5 nanograms per milliliter of THC in their blood, they would automatically be found guilty of driving under the influence of drugs. DUID bill.
Can you give us an idea can you give our listeners an idea how much that is?
Well, it's really different for everybody. In general, I can tell you what I do know. I'm not a scientist. I can tell you that the Westward is our Village Voice media publication out here, and the secret pot critic for Westward, William Breathes, borrowing a name from Fish, of Billy Breeze, underwent a test last year where he didn't consume marijuana for 16 hours. He was under the watch of a doctor. He then went into a center to have his blood drawn, and he tested with 13.5 nanograms per milliliter of THC. So he's at this point hadn't smoked for 16 hours and was 3 times over the legal limit. So with this law, because it's per se and it's not based on impairment at all, it's simply whether or not that individual has that blood level, he would have been found guilty of DUID. And it's absolutely asinine. There is no way that every single user of marijuana falls under the same guidelines and falls under the same impairment rules and falls under the same levels that would determine impairment. So there's many problems with this bill. In Colorado, we already have a 98%, I believe, conviction rate for DUIs. So there is a process already in place that deals with driving under the influence and driving under the influence of both alcohol and drugs. Usually that starts with the driver has committed some type of driving, whether or not they've going too fast, going too slow, not signaling, running a stop sign, and the officer will pull them over. In this case, an officer would simply ask him, are you a medical marijuana patient? If the person said yes, the officer at that point could say, I think you're impaired. We're going to have to take you in and test your blood. No roadside, nothing to blow, just we think you're impaired, so we're going to take you in, and if they hit that level, boom, it's a conviction.
Benny in Phoenix, I've got to jump in here because Benny in Phoenix hit it right on the head. He says he got into a small accident and he's getting ready to serve 2 years in prison, and he hadn't used marijuana for 13 days, and he still got convicted because they found a trace of THC in his blood.
That is nuts.
That is unbelievable.
It is. It is. There is a story right now. So it's an analogy. It's not true. But you have a lady. She drives her kid to school every day. She has chronic pain. She has cancer. When she goes to sleep at night, she has an edible, and it helps her sleep through the night. In the morning, she vaporizes. She's driving her kid to school. She gets T-boned by a drunk driver, who hits her, nails the kid, or not even a drunk driver, T-bones the car, nails the kid. They bring them both in. That driver is not under the influence. They bring her in for a blood draw. She has nothing to do with it. This other person ran a stop sign, smashed into her. She's found guilty of manslaughter for killing her own daughter.
That almost sounds like...
And that's the way it would go down if this law was in place.
And we've even heard, police officers testify that this would completely overburden unnecessarily the system. The system is not made to, pull people over for a signal. I mean, you're talking, this would just, they could be pulling people in, and for the amount of pharmaceuticals that are out there, you're talking the arrest rates could go through the roof. I mean, and maybe this has got the Bureau of Prisons excited in our country because there's a privately funded, privately held group, not funded at all by our government. So very interested parties in building more prisons. But what are we going to do? Lock away half of our country? Come on, it makes no sense.
What doesn't make sense to me is you guys out there in Denver are, paying all these, paying down all your big issues in your state funding with the marijuana, with the taxes and all that stuff. And out here, we have 23, I believe the number is 23 out of 28,000 in our federal prisons are in there for small nonviolent offenses like this, serving pretty good-sized sentences. And we're shipping them out now, and we have to pay for that. I mean, the whole thing could be turned around so easily. It seems sickening to even say it.
Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. And for anybody that's, even, and I think it was Representative Sonnenberg,
it was
right, that, he voted for it. But you
He
also,
voted
in your
for
breath,
it in the House panel, and the reason why he voted for it in the House panel is because he wanted to be. He actually would have voted against it in had it come up before the entire House, but he didn't think that it was appropriate to have it being discussed on just this committee and wanted it to go before the whole House. So he gave it a yes vote so that the entire state, all the representatives, would then be voting on it, which was unfortunate because he could have killed it right there. But he felt as an individual that he wanted more debate on it, and that's why he voted yes, which is why it was going to the House before it died. But there's some things that are important to remember with this whole thing. This is the second year that it came up. Last year it died in Senate. It didn't even make it out of the Senate committee. We know that the content is arbitrary. The state's own expert panel voted not to recommend it. There was a marijuana work group that got behind this last year, and they decided not to recommend specific THC driving limits. The group could not come to a consensus on whether or not blood levels are an indicator of intoxication. You have instances where women and obese patients, and in many cases obese people or older patients, who may be using medication for more than a decade since Coloradoans voted to make medical marijuana an option, would be unfairly targeted because women hold more fat in their bodies. Fat people or obese people hold more fat in their bodies. THC stays in the fat, so they could go days, even weeks at a time without medicating and potentially have these unsafe or arbitrary level of 5 nanograms per milliliter. There's all kinds of problems. There's no science behind this number. And until there is, and until we can do studies on it, there simply isn't a need to enforce an arbitrary per se limit. If anything is going to happen, it should be based on levels of intoxication and levels of impairment, and actually performing a test to see if somebody is determined to be impaired, and not simply
roadside
based on
sobriety test at the very least.
Which we already have.
Which we already have, exactly.
And I can think of one right now. You just kind of wave a bag of Cheetos, and if they run for it, you know. Sorry, I had to throw that in.
Oh man, that's good.
Doing the comedy relief. Sorry.
You got to keep in mind, we're here in Colorado, and Colorado is one of the healthiest states in the country, so Cheetos may not do it. Now, if you have gluten-free 5 degrees snack bins, it might be a little bit different. 34-degree crisp bread, they're all over it.
Well, I think there's, again, this comes at a very interesting time because not only we just saw House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, speak out against all the raids that are happening on a national level. And I mean, we are seeing, I think, for the first time, at least in my opinion, more and more people at the federal level really get involved and speaking out. We see these bills at least being heard, not that they're going anywhere, but actually people sponsoring them with very, very little lobbying efforts. Would you agree? I mean, what do you think is happening on the federal level? What do you think we'll expect here? And I don't want to talk about the legalization bill. We'll talk about that in a second and how that can impact your dispensary. But I mean, just as far as the patient bills that are out there and how we're forming up at the national level.
Well, last night was a very, very interesting, somewhat historical. There was an amendment last night, the Rohrabacher-Hinkie-McClintock-Farr Amendment. It was debated on the floor of the U.S. House last night. It was debated for 45 minutes. And this was a bill to essentially cut off funding for the Department of Justice to enforce medical marijuana in states where medical marijuana is legal. It happened last night, and I guess, it was more symbolic than anything. But I am pleased to say that we had, I believe, 163 votes. Let me see if I can find it. I believe that there are 163 votes in the affirmative yesterday. That was 75% of U.S. Democrats and 10% of Republicans voted in favor to cut off funding to the Department of Justice for medical marijuana. And that's really what we need. That's one way in which we can handle it. If there's no money to enforce this ridiculousness where states have said, yes, we want to regulate marijuana, we want to create a place where patients can come and purchase marijuana or grow marijuana or possess marijuana, let the states do what they want to do. That's what the 10th Amendment is all about. That's what federalism is. States have their own rights to determine laws, and we don't need the feds coming in and enforcing laws when Colorado has said very clearly, we believe in medical marijuana. We believe in giving patients access to marijuana in storefronts for patients to obtain their medical marijuana, to obtain their edibles, to obtain their topicals, and we don't want federal interference. And so it was a very refreshing thing to see last night. And I think that we have to thank, Ed Perlmutter, Diana DeGette, and Jared Polis, who are three of our representatives here, who voted in favor of that to say, let's cut off this funding. It doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, what we would hope would come out of that, and, we've had law enforcement officials, past, present, on the show who have, spoken out that they'd much rather be enforcing more serious crimes than marijuana law crimes. Unless they're dealing with thousands of pounds coming through tunnels across the borders. But I mean, most of them that we've talked to, and I know, my own brother being in law enforcement, the last thing he wants to do is go prosecute somebody and write up all the charges and then go send somebody away for 2 years for a minimal amount of medicine, especially in a state again that has laws on their books. I mean, leave it up to the people who've regulated. They figured it out. It's no different than anything else that's regulated. And let's focus on some more serious crimes.
Or focus on education.
Or
focus on healthcare. Or focus on anything.
So education. So that's an interesting one. And of course, here in Colorado, we've got the legalization bill, legalization of cannabis here in November. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, I'm hearing a lot from people who every other person I talk to, it's it seems about 50-50 on what people think on whether it's going to pass or not. What are your personal thoughts, and how would it affect your business here in Denver?
Sure. Let me give a disclaimer here first. I have my personal opinion. I also am a co-owner of Denver Relief, and I'm also a board member of the Cannabis Business Alliance and Industry Group. So this opinion is my own. I got into this industry because I believed in the powers of marijuana. I'm in this industry because I believe in helping patients, and I believe in marijuana. I personally believe that marijuana should be legal. I personally believe that the legalization efforts that are being put forth are a good thing. So I am for legalization. There are several different amendments that are being proposed, or several different initiatives. One of them has actually made it to the ballot. We know it's going to be on the ballots for sure, Amendment 64, but there's Initiative 70 that's coming up. There's lots of them. I believe that there's going to be 6 different ones.
Are these going to see the light of day, though? I mean, do they have the funding really to even get on the ballot? I mean, you're talking they've got to collect, 86,000 signatures?
86,000. Sure.
I mean, do they have the horsepower behind those initiatives to actually make it to the ballot, in your opinion? I mean, what do you think?
I think Initiative 70 might. We know that Amendment 64 does. I think Initiative 70 might. Personally, I think that we have to go in baby steps, and this is an evolutionary process. And my personal opinion is that Initiative 70 would not be something that the voters would approve. I mean, it's full out, basically removing every rule in regards to marijuana and just, almost regulating marijuana like parsley, if you will.
Well, thank God for us, parsley's not too regulated. But
that's correct. Or regulating marijuana like magic markers or pencils.
Sure.
Not medical marijuana, but regulating marijuana like pencils. I am of the opinion that Amendment 64 is a good thing, and I personally look forward to voting for it come November.
I couldn't agree more with you.
The first 40 million. Do you mind if I briefly speak about it?
No, let's talk about it. I mean, I think for our listeners out there, this is landmark in our country. We saw, of course, California's defeated 2 years ago, and I believe right now it's Colorado, and I think it's either Washington or Oregon that has a similar measure on their bill on their ballot in November.
I think you're right, and it's Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and polls are showing right now in Colorado that this amendment is going to pass. this could be the first place in the world where we have full-on allowed for legalization of marijuana.
And what do you think that it'll have as far as a backlash from the feds?
It's going to be very interesting. You know, by that point, I hope if they see that the voters, not only for medical marijuana, but the voters of Colorado have said, listen, we want marijuana to be legal here, there's going to be a much bigger backlash if the feds come in here than shutting down medical marijuana centers operating within 1,000 feet of schools.
I mean, it really becomes, citizen rights. I mean,
it absolutely does. I mean, when it retires,
you can't argue with that.
I have to agree with you, Vince.
You can't argue with that. Joe, what are some of our listeners saying out there? What kind of questions do we have today?
I think most people are kind of sitting here listening today. Let me jump back to that. A lot of basic comments, and people are kind of answering themselves here. Wanda from Denver, I hope a dispensary goes in near my home because of the security that they have to have in place, and I'm not even a smoker. Basically stuff like that. So, I mean, nothing really pressing. So let's get back to what you got going on, because this is some good information for sure.
Well, and I think, from a business standpoint, I mean, what kind of impact do you think this will have on your business? I would think, Ian, that this would have a very positive impact. That, now people, and I would imagine they just do away with the registration piece of it. I mean, you don't have to go register to go pick up a six-pack at my local liquor store. They check my ID and boom, I'm out. We've got $5 million going towards education under the 64 initiative.
It's more than that, isn't it?
Well, I think it's the first $5 million, and I think it allows for additional revenue to go to education. And I mean, Colorado's 38th in the nation for our schools. I mean, Tabor laws just unfortunately impact us so negatively in this state with regards to education, and jobs and education, in my opinion, should be the number one two things that we're talking about in either reelecting our government officials or putting new people in office.
Absolutely. I believe, Vincent, the number is actually $40 million. I believe the way that the bill is written is the first $40 million. What it will do, if Amendment 64 passes, there will be an excise tax placed on recreational marijuana. Medical marijuana will continue under the same rules that it has. People pay sales tax on it, and that's it. But if marijuana itself becomes legalized for recreational use for adults over the age of 21, just like they can walk into a liquor store and buy alcohol, just like they can walk into a convenience store and buy cigarettes if they're over the age of 18. If they're over 21, they're going to be able to walk into a recreational store or a medical marijuana store and purchase marijuana. Medical marijuana patients will not be forced to pay this excise tax of 15%. I believe is the rate that they're talking right now. Recreational patients will be paying 15%, but the first $40 million collected in these tax revenues will go directly into the public school system.
And I got to jump in here because Betty Penn is creating quite a stir. She can't believe the nerve and doesn't even believe that this is America the way that she used to see it. Cannot believe that we can even think of funding our schools and education for our children with drug money.
Well, and, let's think about what's really happening then, okay, Betty, is, right now, people are using marijuana whether it's legal or not. So let's just make that clear. The only difference is that money is not being taxed. Unfortunately, it's not being regulated. There is no protection for our citizens, and the money most often is going right across the border. And if it's not going across the border, it's going to fund even more illegal drugs and things that are much more dangerous to our society. So, I mean, let's not put the veil on and be like, oh, well, now that legalization's here, people are going to start using marijuana. Please. I mean, people have been using marijuana for thousands of years.
It's not like, it's not, yeah.
We don't have the money coming into our school systems. We don't have the money going into to help people who do get addicted to be able to fund these types of programs. And unfortunately, in states like Colorado, where our taxes are so damn low, we've got great streets, but, we can't get the voters to wake up and go, oh, you know what, maybe I should put a little bit of my money into my education of our student base, and then we look around and go, oh, well, why are all of our kids running around the alleys using drugs? Well, because our schools suck. I mean, let's be realistic. So, I mean, Betty, thanks for the comment, but please wake up.
Yeah, just know, Betty, that we're talking about for 21, year old and older responsible people. If they decide to do that legally, and our schools and our children then can benefit from the money anyway. I mean, it's proven that marijuana is much less damaging than alcohol anyway. Maybe it's a Delaware thing, Betty. Anyway, go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not saying that, hey, listen, marijuana should be around to entirely fund our school systems by any means. I mean, unfortunately, everybody needs to roll up their sleeves and really start thinking about where we're at and where we value education. I mean, there's thousands of things that we could throw in a few cents here and there and have the best schools and the best education systems in our country. But, we don't prioritize it that way. And, shame on us.
And, Betty, we're right there with you. If it comes down to where there's a vote that, in high schools, they can go ahead and order. I'll take the pizza, a chocolate milk, and can you throw a joint in with that? We'll make sure we vote against that as well.
Absolutely.
I think that there is a time and a place for marijuana use. It's certainly not bringing it into high schools. It's certainly not bringing it into elementary schools. But to be able to provide funding for those schools through something like marijuana and having the ability to tax and give back to the community is a good thing. And I think that it should be looked at in a proactive sense, that we as an industry recognize that there are deficiencies in our education system, and we recognize that there are deficiencies in healthcare. And to be able to take this money that people will gladly pay into and use it for education, that's a phenomenal thing. That's nothing but a good thing.
And it disarms our drug dealers. I mean, it disarms the people who are unethical, who aren't doing things the right way, who aren't paying into the system in which they're taking from. In which, why I've been a strong proponent of the dispensary model, is that these are good business people in our community, not only distributing good quality medicine through standards and ethical practices, but furthermore, they're actually good stewards of the community and involved in many different aspects of our community, more so than I've seen from other industries in an exponential factor. I mean, I've just been really overwhelmed in being in the industry and knowing, how many people get involved in, events with the National MS Society or Cancer Society or, blood drive donation, rallies or
we have an entire
great community service
wing.
Yeah, you guys do that.
We have the Denver Relief Green Team. For the past 3 years, we've gone out to the largest marijuana rally in the country, the 420 rally here in Denver, Colorado. Last year, MMAPA was a part of it. The previous 2 years, they were. And this year, we were able to work with another medical marijuana center. We had 25 volunteers who came here. We put on Green Team T-shirts on them that they got to take home. We had a bus come and pick everybody up. We fed everybody. And while there were people out celebrating and in the peaceful protest for their right to use marijuana on 420 at the Capitol, we had people with green biodegradable trash bags and rubber gloves picking up trash. We've done it every year. We do a free bicycle and wheelchair repair clinic in our courtyard, which used to be right next to the Denver Police. The Denver Cop Shop used to be our neighbors here at Denver Relief. And we do a free bicycle and wheelchair repair service once a month. It doesn't cost anything. You roll up, you bring your bike, your wheelchair, your skateboard. As long as we have the parts, we'll fix it. If we can't, we'll send it to a bike shop. As long as it's within reason, we'll take care of it. But we replace tubes, tires, brakes, derailleurs. We are starting to do more things. I just got a phone call today. We're starting to work with, this is great. I got a call from ECAR. ECAR is a local community farm here. They are established on the Denver Academy of Torah campus here in Denver, a private Jewish school. They have reached out to us and asked us to come help them plant their community garden. During the winter, they're teaching people how to garden indoors. They know who better than do this than farmers, us, who are cultivating marijuana indoors at all times because of the regulations that were required. So we're now going to start to work with this community who's actively going to promote the fact this is an education group. This is a religious school is going to promote that they are working hand in hand with a medical marijuana center whose community volunteers are going to go and start to plant the community garden that gives vegetables to the poor and indigent, that gives vegetables to these schools. And so, being out there and being responsible, it just so happens that my business partner and I are also involved in many other community organizations. We're on the board of the Denver Center Theater Company. We're on the Kayvon, my business partner, is a Denver Kid Mentor. He has been mentoring a child for the past 5 years. We're active in civil rights. We're active in all kinds of things besides just marijuana. That's why we got involved in marijuana, because we've always wanted to give back to the community, and this is an opportunity to help people.
Oh, I got a good one for you here.
Oh, go ahead.
Officer Victor from Stanton, New Jersey says, let's get rid of the terrible, dangerous medicines grown in human feces from Mexico. Let's get rid of the drug cartels by making it legal. Let's put them out of business and legalize this medicine. Come on, get real. I am a cop and a patient. I will not arrest marijuana patients, and because of the harsh penalties, I will not do marijuana arrests for small-time users, period. I am taking a stand, and so are many of my other officer friends. Wow.
Amen, officer. Amen.
Wow.
Yeah, no, and being from New Jersey myself, I know how strict the laws are out there. I personally, I went through officer candidate school at the New Jersey State Police Academy, and I tell you what, they are arrest wild out there. There are more police on the streets in New Jersey than there are teachers here in Colorado, and that's a fact. When again we look at how this is being fueled and what cops are doing every day, putting their lives at risk for what? A joint? You're gonna go book somebody. It takes several hours to process and put them through that kind of hell for something that people have been doing for thousands of years. People are not going to stop using marijuana. Anybody that thinks that that's happening, wake up. And to waste our time and precious resources prosecuting these people, thank you very much, officer. I think that means a lot to our listeners to hear that. And it's important because you guys are out on the streets, and I'm sure you'd much rather be protecting our citizens from real crime, the real threats to our society, rather than somebody smoking a joint. Again, and we're not talking about somebody smoking a joint behind the wheel of a vehicle, but we're talking about somebody who smoked a joint 2 days ago, gets behind the wheel of their vehicle, and is now being prosecuted under DUID bills that make absolutely no sense.
You're right, and Victor, if you're still listening to us, there are other officers just like you all over the country. There's actually an organization that is set up. I believe it's called LEAP, which stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and there are other reasonable-minded law enforcement officers that have exactly the same sentiments that you share. So I would encourage you to check them out. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition.
Wow. Yeah.
And we just had a lieutenant from New Mexico, a sergeant from Oregon, and a cop from Phoenix, all with the same type of comments.
Yeah, nobody wants to be wasting their time doing this. It's senseless. It would be no different than arresting somebody after they've had a couple beers the night before. They get in their car to drive their son to school with no alcohol in their breath, and now all of a sudden you've got this fabulous test to be able to tell if somebody had a drink a week ago, and you're going to go separate them from their children? This is what's happening in a court of law today. Is people are actually losing access to their loved ones because of our laws. It is ridiculous. It is time. I wish every law enforcement, anybody involved in law enforcement who's listening out there, write your congressman, your senator, and have a voice in this. Stop wasting it. I talked to my brother, and he's like, man, they got me involved in such petty BS, and I don't get to fight the real crime that's out there and the stuff that's really impacting our communities. And, again, I don't know if there's some, grant money that people are getting at the local and county level that says, listen, you've got X amount of MMJ, or not MMJ, but cannabis arrests, you get additional funding. I don't know how it works exactly. I'd love to hear from somebody on that. But, we have got our priorities completely backwards in what we're prosecuting in a court of law today.
Holy cow, you talk about priorities being wrong here. Betty Lindquist from Rhode Island got pulled over for speeding. They found 2 grams of marijuana, and I'm not quite sure why she I understand the reason, but this is kind of weird. It doesn't make her look very good. They found 240 Percocet and 100 Somas from Mexico. All that was washed, but they charged her for the 2 grams of marijuana. What the?
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
And if you talk to anybody that's fighting crime down in Florida right now, I mean, the pill mills are completely out of control.
Oh, my. I watched a 2-hour show yesterday on that. I cannot believe that. They hope for marijuana over there to get rid of those pills.
Big farmers, somehow, they've got it budgeted. They it's like, 1.2% of people will share their medication with somebody. And that's just like built in the budget for these companies. Oh, additional revenues. Do you think they lose any sleep at night?
They have an airline carrier. They have an airline carrier that flies to this place in Florida. It's called the Oxycodone Express. Truthfully.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we need in our communities for sure.
Yeah, right.
Again, and I think it all, again, starts with sensible regulation. I mean, regulation is a good thing. It protects people. It allows these things that people are already doing in society to fit in. Anybody who wants to see the facts that are out there, go look up Portugal and how they're handling drug abuse. They're not incarcerating their community, their loved ones, their brothers and sisters and friends. They're handling it as a disease and giving people the opportunity to rehabilitate who do have problems and are threats to others in our community. They're certainly not locking them up and at their $60,000 a year. Are you kidding me? This is sickening.
No, there was just a summit. Ethan Nadelman, the executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance, was just down in South America with Branson and Vicente Fox and the leaders and former presidents of several countries and governors here in the United States, but leaders of several foreign South American countries who all gathered and are trying to do this as well, recognizing that prohibition simply is not working anymore, that we need to regulate it, we need to cut off the cartels, and times are changing. This isn't 1919. This isn't prohibition.
And if there is any light at the end of the tunnel, we've at least gotten our commander-in-chief, President Obama, to be able to at least recognize that our failed war on drugs is not working and it needs to be revamped, and we need to take a closer look at this, and we need to reprioritize our law enforcement in this country. So, you know what? The debate has started. It is not going to end. Now all we need to do is educate the populace to ensure that they have the facts so that they can make informed decisions and not decisions based upon the lobbyists who sit in Washington.
You're right, Vincent. We have seen we're lucky to have Jared Polis as a representative here in Colorado.
Very lucky.
And he and Barney Frank are trying to introduce legislation to allow banks to deal with us, to change the tax code so we no longer have to file under the 280E tax code, which is a tax code that's put in place specifically for drug traffickers. And he has started a campaign called the Fearless Campaign, which you can also see online, www.fearlesscampaign.com, to kind of show exactly what's going on with that. He's huge with education. He's been influential in Spanish ESL schools, and a phenomenal person, a phenomenal congressperson, and is starting a phenomenal campaign, the Fearless Campaign. And we need more highly influential people like him to come out and speak out in favor of the fact that that this craziness has to end.
Ian, I could not agree more. Joe, any last questions or comments from your neck of the woods?
No, just been reading diligently here. There's just an outpouring of support, from the country on this, and it's some things have got to change. That's all I can say.
Well, day by day, week by week, and month by month, it is going to change.
That's right.
It'll be interesting again, and we'll be sure to update our listeners as to the outcome to see if the DUID bill here in Colorado sees the light of day in this special session. We hope that it will not, and we hope that we will, give us another year till next year's legislative session begins to be able to get the facts in front of our decision makers here at the state. So, we know that all eyes are on Colorado right now, and it's really crucial, again, can to get the facts and protect our patients, protect our loved ones. And, so again, we'll update our listeners next week. Ean Seeb of Denver Relief, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the Marijuana Report, and we look forward to catching up with you soon in a future show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a privilege. It's been an honor. And for anybody who wants to get in touch with us, they can reach us through our Twitter handle is Denver Relief, and you can also find us online at denverrelief.com. If you send an email, we will absolutely respond. We respond to every inquiry we receive. If we can help anybody in the country, educate them, don't hesitate to get in contact with us. We'd be happy to assist and to provide answers to your questions. Thank you guys so much for having me on the air today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Joe?
Yes.
Well, how's the weather out there in Arizona? It's 110 today? Or?
It's pretty warm. It's 95 degrees.
Wow. Well, my friend, it's been real fun and real. We will definitely catch up next week.
For sure. Let me ask you a quick question here. I've got a guest that I would love to bring on soon, and I've had a lot of requests to hear him. He's the attorney for freedom. Do we have a guest next week lined up yet?
I would be happy to have that gentleman or woman on, whoever that might be.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about some of the issues, and I think that expand the show just a little bit beyond the cannabis issues that are at stake, and talk about all the freedoms that are at stake here as Americans.
That's right.
We have prided ourselves in being the home of the brave and free, and unfortunately, we are not. We are not headed in that direction, and I think that getting people to be aware of what's happening in this country right now, knowing that our liberties and our freedoms are being squandered away at an alarming rate. I think that would be a very, very interesting show, and to blend a little bit about what's happening in cannabis politics.
That's right.
How that's affecting other parts of our freedoms.
Well, I will contact him. I was just watching a segment he did on CNN a couple of weeks ago. I mean, he is a very, very passionate man. It will be a tremendous show. So I'll get back to you right away on that. Let's catch up soon. And everybody listening, we've got CAC Live coming up here shortly, some great guests. So stay tuned. Vincent, thank you. Another great show. I will talk to you very soon, my friend.